My name is Bertha Nherera. I'm with OSHA Wholesome Foods. That's the name of my company, which I founded in 2011. OSHA Zimbabwe is a member of PELUM Zimbabwe, and I'm from Zimbabwe. For me, my general reflections are that my Food is African campaign, for me, it focuses on food sovereignty. A lot of our documents, they are focusing on food security. So what I see on my Food is African, it's focusing on food sovereignty, which is talking about control of our own food systems as African people. It's like we are the ones who are talking, we are bringing in the narrative about the food system. So we are mainly promoting our traditional foods because these, due to colonization, were kind of renegated. So now we want to bring them forth. And the main reason is because of the problems that we've been facing. The problems are mainly to do with the increase, rise in NCDs, non-communicable diseases. We're talking of the cancers, we're talking of sugar diabetes, hypertension. So we're talking of diseases, even problems of micronutrients in the children under 5, and also for women, like problems of anemia. But if we look at our own foods, they are very high in nutrients. Like we've got vegetables that are very high in iron, to the point that we don't need to take tablets to supplement. We don't even need to fortify our foods. It fortify like maize. Like for Zimbabwe, maize has become a staple, but maize is not a staple food for Zimbabwe and even Africa. Our foods are the finger millet, the pearl millet, and sorghum. So in terms of starches, we have our starches that have got all the micronutrients that we require for our bodies, even for the elderly people. So for me, my Food is African. It resonates with me because this is what I do in my own company. I'm processing it. And my Food is African is coming to bring awareness to the policymakers, to the mothers, to the young people. Of course, we have been having pockets of people doing some work here and there. So I see my Food is African bringing that big voice that we need from our countries and also at the continental level. Because we want the African Union to recognize the importance of us Africans coming up with our own policy and our own governments to also come up with a policy that talks to us as Africans. Because in Zimbabwe, the people that produce most of the foods that I'm talking about are the masses, the smallholder farmers in Zimbabwe. And because of colonization, a lot of money was going into a few export crops like tobacco, maize, rice, and wheat. So the other challenge that my Food is African also address is climate change. We are talking of climate adaptation as Africa. I am coming from sub-Saharan Africa, and we know that we are going to have less rain. So whilst we are irrigating maize now, whilst we are irrigating wheat now, wheat is not for our environment. So it means we need to teach our children to change their palate from wanting wheat bread and probably having bread from sweet potatoes. So it's like we have to be innovative. We can have bread, but which other foods that do well in our environment, where we can still make the bread, but making use of food that grow well in our environment. For example, the millets that I'm talking about, the sorghum that I'm talking about. So we need our universities, our researchers, our young people to innovate and experiment and come up with recipes that make use of ingredients that are coming from our African foods. If we are going to have salads, can we have salads maybe from groundnuts, maybe from nyemba, from other vegetables? So we have to talk about the narrative. Now dietitians, what are they using for recommendations? It's mostly exotic foods because most of our education system tended to focus on exotic foods. And they talk of different colors. But in Africa, sometimes it's not about the different colors because a lot of our vegetables are rich in carotene, like cowpea leaves, which was called cowpea leaves. We call it nyemba, and now we want to call it nyemba because we also don't want to call it cowpea. You can see from it, young people think this was meant for cattle, because I think at the time, because it's very rich in proteins, it was cultivated for cattle feed, but also for us it was not for cattle feed. That vegetable is very rich in carotene, which is found in carrots, but carrots are orange, but the vegetable I'm talking about is green. So it's like we have to deconstruct to say maybe when you've got different colors, then it means they've got different nutrients, because Africa is different from a continent. I believe that every continent has been given foods that do well in their particular environment. I don't think God created for the foods to be crossing all over. That's the reason why we are having problems with chemicals. If I give you an example, I was trained in agriculture. My first degree is in BSc agriculture. I was trained in industrial agriculture. And industrial agriculture, we were taught mainly about the exotics. And we were taught mainly to control pests through using chemicals. And now, when I joined PELUM Zimbabwe, I think in 2007, that's when I learned the importance of the traditional foods, because we're having fairs. And now I can compare, because I have exposure to industrial agriculture and I've got exposure to agroecology. So I now know the advantages of agroecology over industrial agriculture. I now know the reason why industrial agriculture was pushed over agroecology, because in industrial agriculture we're talking of capitalists, we're talking of multi corporations who want to sell the chemicals, they want to sell the seed. Food was never meant to be a commercial product. It's meant for people to eat, to have food, so that food is like medicine. So I want to come back to the issue of the chemicals on the industrial agriculture. I want to give you an example. It's winter now in Zimbabwe. If we grow cabbages, rape, and all these exotic leaves, they do well. Why? Because it's winter and it's cool, and these vegetables, they are used to that kind of environment. Come our summer, which is going to be starting like in November, those vegetables, they are affected by aphids. So for farmers to control aphids, what do? They spray them with very toxic purple label chemicals. So it's because we are trying to grow cabbages in the wrong season. They are supposed to be grown in winter if we are going to grow them. But in any case, if we compare the nutritional values from cabbages and the ones that you get from our own vegetables, like we have got Nherera, we've got moa, which is amaranthus. Nherera is a spider plant. We have got blackjack, which is, we call it mutsine. That's Bidens pilosa. So they are very high in nutrients. And during our summer period, these they are self-seeded, so they just grow. During our first phase, we did a baseline because we wanted to see how things are. And from the baseline, there are some policy issues that we identified that are kind of bottlenecks in terms of use or consumption of traditional foods. I can just give you an example. We have a policy which makes it difficult for farmers to sell their produce directly, say, to boarding schools or to government hospitals. So because of that, it makes food difficult to get to these institutions, so they tend to concentrate on that. So that baseline, we are using that information to inform policy. So we plan to have a press release sometime in June, where we are going to make use of the findings that we have found from like the baseline. We've also done a food basket assessment in 2 of our districts. We have findings from there. We have also engaged our policymakers. We have also done a review of some of our critical strategic documents, like from the Ministry of Agriculture and also from our Food and Nutrition Council. Our Food and Nutrition Council is a key government institution which sits in the office of the President, because food security and food sovereignty is a national issue. So I've got messages for our government. Our government should provide an enabling policy environment. And when I say that, I mean that we should have a food policy. If it's possible, we can even have a ministry just for food. Like we have got Ministry of Agriculture. In Zimbabwe, I know I've got Food and Nutrition Council. So I was thinking that for us to really push this, because it was not being supported for a long time. Yeah. If we put it at ministry level, it means the government will be able to budget for it, and it means then we'll be able to budget for research, we can budget for domestication, we can budget for promotion, we can be able to do that. So that's what I'm calling for our government to have a policy on food. So I'm calling on the African governments and Africa Union that we need to have a food policy. Yeah. And then my message to our private sector, we have got a lot of rich black people in Africa, the Dangotes, from Nigeria, from Zimbabwe, we've got the Strive Masiwa. Where are they? What are they supporting? Where are they putting their money? We need to have our private sector funding this food. Yes, because we also need to have Africa International Development Agency. So if they put their money in one pot, then we can start to have them funding even AFSA. Yeah. So that's my message to private sector, and then to the general public. We need to open our minds. We need to decolonize our minds. We need to be receptive, to think, to know our history, to know why are we eating the food that we're eating, why this campaign, so that we can start producing, processing, and consuming our own African foods to solve our own problems, which I've mentioned at the beginning.